Welcome and thanks for listening to Relational Practice, a social work podcast. I'm Dr. Jodie Park.
And I'm Mackey, and we're both private practice social workers who work in child protection, out-of-home care and trauma. And today we're recording on Dharawal land in New South Wales, Australia.
Please subscribe to our podcast, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and send us any questions or comments you have to our email relationalpractice01@gmail.com. And we have a special guest today that we would like to introduce, Jess.
Hi.
Hi, Jess.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Jesse's doing a placement with us.
Yeah, my final social work placement for a Master of Social Work.
So she's also sitting in our podcast recording.
That's right. The things you get roped into.
I know, it's scary, isn't it? Doesn't it feel weird?
It does.
Was there a bit of power imbalance in the come on in and
this
podcast?
I was sort of thrown in. So you've got to, that's social work though sometimes, isn't it? You just need to roll in and go with it and reflect and think through and accept what comes a little bit.
True. You're our first guest, which our podcast isn't about having guests, but it is kind of exciting to have a third person in the room.
Yeah. It just makes it feel that much weirder because it feels weird every time we record it anyway. But it's good.
And now
you're in a good way.
The host, right? If you have a guest.
Host. Don't know about that. But thanks for being here. We're very happy to have you as a student.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the start of your placement. So who knows how many more episodes you might hop on.
Yes, who knows?
All right. So today we're going to be continuing our conversation about parenting capacity assessment, or assessing for parenting capacity is probably a better way to put that. So we're just building on what we have already talked about in episodes 8 and 9. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to focus on formal parenting capacity assessments, and we're going to talk about why do an assessment. We're also going to talk about how do you do it. Again, from our perspective, people will do this very differently, so we're just going to talk about how we do it. What skills are used, the importance of knowing when you're being played during an assessment, which is actually kind of fun. I kind of like it when people think they're playing you or playing me.
I guess for me, the worry is when I'm not sure if I've been, potentially groomed, played, whatever word you want to use.
Yeah.
For me, my thought is always, what if I'm not picking up that, this is all very fake and, being played? Because there are absolutely times where you can tell, but I'm sure there's times when I've been played like a fiddle.
For sure, absolutely. There's smarter people than me in this world, and they'd know exactly how to manipulate me. Yeah. Good point. All right. We're going to talk about how long is the information relevant in a parenting capacity assessment, and then we're going to move into kind of chatting about the theories, more a brain dump of theories that we think underpin parenting capacity assessing, and we'll do some practice examples based on theory. Just how theory interplays with actually doing the assessment work. All right.
Sounds like a good plan. Let's see if we can stay on topic.
All right, let's start with why do we do an assessment? Why do we do them?
I guess that really depends on, in private practice at least, when a referral comes in from an agency or another professional. Oftentimes people will ask for a parenting capacity assessment.
Yeah.
But I guess it's about, for us, teasing out what exactly are they after and what is it, what do they want from it. So a parenting capacity assessment is just one of those big global statements, and we would all do them differently.
Yeah.
But oftentimes asking the person referring that in, what are you trying to get out of this?
Yeah.
What are you asking actually?
Yeah.
Oftentimes if the court's involved, there'll be a long list of terms of reference.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, sometimes I wonder if they're just a cut and paste from other referrals or, a bit old. But what is someone actually trying to ask of us to explore and assess? But generally in the realms of my synopsis, what does this person or couple's parenting look like, and what does that mean for that child today, but also in the future?
Yeah. And I think that's the crux of formal parenting capacity assessments. It is about that assessment of harm and likelihood of future harm. And if there is likelihood of future harm, how can that, in some way, can that be mitigated? What needs to happen for it to be mitigated? But you know what? I remember back when I used to do referrals for parenting capacity assessments when I worked for a statutory agency, and I had no idea what I was asking most of the time. I just knew I needed something. I needed something that told me a little bit more than what I already knew about how this family works together and what that will mean for the safety of the kid.
Of the child. I think also I really liked when I got them to the chronology of what's happened before.
Yeah.
And it's in one document as opposed to across several agencies or sitting in different formats.
Yes.
But then I really liked that someone other than me could put it all together and give a bit of a plan for where to go next. So oftentimes when I was stuck, they were very helpful.
Yeah, great.
Like, what do you need to, what haven't I considered?
Yeah.
And where are you going to next for this family?
Can we do a sideline about chronologies?
Sure.
Because I think when you said that, in my mind, I was like, I think chronologies are such an important practice tool. And I don't think they're done like they used to be done. And maybe they've never been done how I thought they used to be done. Maybe it's just that I used to do them.
I think they take a lot of time, don't they?
Yeah, I think some of that's about the organisational context. And
Absolutely.
Other competing priorities in that.
Yes. But I was referred a piece of work a few years ago from an agency, and it was a parenting capacity assessment. It never eventuated. I actually couldn't get into the home to do the actual observations and the interviews. But what I did do was the chronology for the agency, and it was very lengthy. And they were so grateful because no one in the agency was ever going to have time to put it together.
Yeah.
So whenever that family was ready or whatever the next steps was, at least they had this, chronology of all the information that their agency held, but also what other agencies held. And just having it in order is so helpful. So what's the child's age when this is happening and how does it flow? You get kind of a snapshot of a family's kind of timeline. And I think that helps when you think about child development, when you think about, parenting a toddler versus parenting a primary age school child. It's very helpful to have that context.
Do you know, I agree completely. And I've always been a 200% fan of chronologies, but I think it's such a lost opportunity for practice because there isn't time to do them. And I completely get there isn't time to do them. I think the world of child protection out of home care has moved to a place where it's all about your outputs, isn't it? It's all about getting more work done for less resources, and we kind of know that that's the practice arena. And I just feel really sad that chronologies are something that's kind of been a victim of that, because I think in terms of what we've talked about so far on this podcast, a chronology is a tool that can absolutely help you to analyze and increase your own professional judgment about a family that you're working with. Such an important tool, and I wish they were used more, and I wish there was an understanding about how important they would be to use more widely.
You talked a little bit, I think it was your last episode or the one before, about timelines as well, using that with parents to help them see or understand, and with kids about their life story work. I know I worked in a mandated context at one point with this mum, and she had I guess there were reports about her not supervising her child appropriately or having, a mental health response herself a number of times through her child's life. And using a chronology and a timeline was really helpful. I mapped out with her, here's all the police events where you were arrested or where you needed to be scheduled, and she had a look at it and she said, oh my gosh, they're all around a public holiday or a celebration like Easter, Christmas, Anzac Day. She said, I'm drinking then. They're all connected to when I'm drinking.
Wow.
And it was a really useful way for her to get some insight as well.
Yeah.
Without me saying, hey, I think you're having an issue when you're drinking.
Yeah.
She was able to look and then go, I think I think it's
think about the change then, cycle of change and where you are.
Yeah.
That's so powerful for someone to move into that pre-contemplation or contemplation stage, because it's come from within. That's their insight, as opposed to a worker saying, like you just said.
Yes. So often we go in and say, you're doing this, you're doing that. But it was a way for her to recognise. And then that impacts the relationship, between the worker and the parent, and allows a co-construction of what happens next.
It also, if you think about parenting capacity, in the domains that we've talked about, had the empathy for a child and understanding, insight into child protection concerns. It's all kind of so nice and neat in that, that parent's insight and where you can go from there, as opposed to, again, someone just trying to tell a parent, this is what we think. Cool example, Jess.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess, why do you do an assessment? And we've talked about, I mean, it's for lots of different reasons. Usually it is about, as we've said, capturing what's happened to date and then kind of giving some recommendations about moving forward, what life for that family is going to look like. We do there's a lot of kind of court-ordered parenting capacity assessments, but also more and more, I think, we're getting referrals for non-court ordered. So from agencies who just want some support with how to case plan moving forward.
Yeah, or when they're a little stuck, I think. We've had a few lately where maybe the caseworker's new, or the caseworker's worked with the family for a pretty long time, and they're feeling a bit stuck and not sure. It's, good to question your own professional judgment and ask for, an outsider's view at times too, where that's available to agencies. We've had a few referrals like that lately. Yeah,
that's true. Or we've had parenting capacity assessments kind of hidden within other referrals.
That's true too.
So can you just go out and have a look at what's going on in this family? We're just not sure, but really what they want to know is, how is this family functioning? And what is the actual impact of the parenting on the child, whether that's a carer's caring or a parent's parenting, or that might probably be the same thing.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we do it? That's a big question.
I mean, they are massive pieces of work.
Done well. We've read some shit ones that weren't massive pieces of
work. Okay, that's true. Well, I guess Jodie has taught me how to do parenting capacity assessments, and they are time consuming.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reading, there's a lot of interviewing, observations, a lot of typing, pulling it all together, a lot of reading of research or, articles to make sure you're interpreting something correctly or you applying a theory correctly. So they are time consuming. I guess how you've taught me to do it, I start by reading a little bit of the file.
Yeah.
I have to say I don't read a whole lot before I go and meet the parents or parent, though, because I like to go in with enough of an understanding about who everyone is.
Yeah.
But that's about it. I don't really want to go in with the file's kind of bias or a narrative that might exist on file. So I don't read everything before I typically meet the parent or parents for the first time. But then it's about a lot of interviews, isn't it? And understanding from that parent and parent's perspective, who they are, who are their children, what does their family system look like, how does it work, what does a normal day look like, what does an abnormal day look like, what are the challenges that they think exist for themselves and their family, and how have services in the past been helpful or not helpful, and also observations. And observations of them in the interview process, but also observations of them with their children, with other agencies or whoever's interacting with them.
Yeah.
That's the start of it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I mean, you're right. I think calling it a big piece of work is a really good description, but it's also really scary. It's a scary piece of work for the parent. It's really hard, I think. I would hate to have to sit through a parenting capacity assessment myself. Somebody talking to me about how I have parented my children or the way that my family functions. Because I would be wondering myself, okay, well, what, am I answering the right way? Am I saying the right thing or am I saying the wrong thing? And I guess for the assessor, one of the skills that we have needed to maybe already or has always been there, but one of the skills in parenting capacity assessments that I feel like I need to learn, I've had to learn quickly, is about trying to work out I guess, trying to interpret nonverbal behaviour, I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way. Yeah. Which I think I haven't always been good at. I think I like to think I was good at it, but I actually don't think I was good at it. And I think I've had to get better at that, at trying to understand what their behaviour might be telling me versus what their words are telling me, and then trying to work out, well, how can I test that? And that's
the testing bit for me, it can be the tricky bit.
Yeah.
Because, well, sometimes I'm pretty direct and blunt, and it's not always the best way to be in a parenting
I've never known that about you.
Assessment, that real curiosity around what am I seeing, but sometimes in the moment, like it's so much easier when you come back and you think, should have said that, could have asked that, or when you're watching someone else's practice. I always find popping off the top of my head ideas for how, but in the moment when I'm doing it, sometimes I get a little bit stuck. Like, I really want to ask because what I'm seeing is this, but what is also happening is this. How am I going to frame a question that's going to be curious and open and non-judgmental, and is going to keep this rapport building going, that they're going to engage back and give me what I'm actually trying to test. Sometimes I get really stuck in my head, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, and they've also been talking, and I'm trying to write notes. Yeah. There's a lot going on in it.
There is a lot going on, because it does feel like, I think feeling stuck is a really good way to describe when you're in the middle of a big parenting capacity assessment, a really complex one. You do kind of feel like you're stuck. Like, not stuck in terms of how do I move forward, maybe stuck's not the right word, but you kind of feel like, I think sometimes I feel, I'm going to own this, I feel like I'm like wading through a river, and all of the information of this family is around me, and trying to work out how do you actually pull yourself out of this river by latching onto what's important and letting go of some of the other stuff. Because what if you let go of something that's actually important? It's a big thing.
It is. And I think you said, it's scary for parents. Absolutely is. But I, am new to private practice work, and it has been scary also stepping in. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that I've had you as a mentor, because I couldn't imagine trying to just do formal capacity assessments alone and without someone guiding me, because they're also scary as a practitioner. You've got to know so much theory. You've got to know about so many different challenges that face parenting. You've got to be so aware of your own biases as a parent, and as a, social worker. There is so much knowledge that sits beneath the parenting capacity assessment, and then comes the family information, and that oftentimes is massive. And like you just said, wading through all of that. And I think I did some training early on when I came into private practice around assessments, and I was trained to always tell the parents or parent on the last visit what my recommendations would be. And I remember you said to me, Jodie, how are you going to do that? Because you actually haven't had time to analyse the information. Like, you're wading through all of this stuff. You've seen so much, you've heard so much. You need time to come back, write it up, think about it, reflect, possibly engage in supervision. There's no way you're going to be able to tell these parents what you're going to recommend. And if that's the practice, you were like, I'd be pretty concerned. And I was so grateful for that advice, because I'd paid all this money to go and get this training, and that's what they were telling assessors. You give the recommendation. I agree where it's safe to do so, and you have done all of the work that, as a private practitioner, it's great to go back to those people and say, this is what I'm recommending and this is why. But absolutely not at the time when you're walking out the door of the last interview, because you haven't had time to analyse, to reflect, to really think about what you're recommending. Like, I'm so grateful for that advice, so I'm sharing that.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I mean, I just think maybe that's the difference between some of those, God, this sounds so judgy, and I'm going to own my judginess. But maybe that's the difference between some of those shit assessments and more robust ones that actually are a little bit more analytical, and there's some real substance to them. Maybe that's the difference. I'd be too worried at the end of, say, the third interview with these people that I've met, maybe 3 or 4 times, to go, do you know what, I think you're great people. I'm going to be recommending, restoration or whatever it is that I'm recommending. I just think I would be too scared to do that, because what if I got it wrong?
Yeah. And there have been times where I've done all the parenting interviews, you've done the observation, you've talked to the service providers, you've maybe talked to adult children or other family members.
Yeah.
you come back and finish the chronology and you're putting everything together in your written document, that it actually just comes to you, that analysis, as you're putting everything in an ordered fashion, you're already starting in your mind. You're starting to analyze, you're starting to piece together pieces of this big jigsaw, which is how you get kind of unstuck from all the information.
It's true.
And then the last bit is the recommendations. And they just, sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm furiously writing on a post-it note, and this, and this, and this. So by the time you've finished your analysis,
you've got everything.
You've actually got a whole list of recommendations. And there have been 2 times where I actually thought, oh, I'm going to recommend this. And as I'm pulling it all together and writing it, it's actually not at all what I thought I was going to recommend.
I had the exact same experience.
Yeah.
And when I start an assessment, if I think, oh my goodness, this is going to be a really big one, and I need to make sure I don't get lost, and I have a little bit of anxiety around that, by the time I get to the end, I really didn't need to have those anxious feelings, because what happens to you happens to me. It's so clear. By the time you put all the information together, you're doing your analysis, it's really clear which way you need to move forward.
Yeah,
which is lucky.
So lucky, because otherwise, you do feel like you're in this overwhelm or mess of information. But as you start to pull it together, when you've finished all of the formal interviews, observations, it just does come together like a jigsaw.
And I think maybe the biggest bit of advice around if you're going to start doing parenting capacity assessments is to make sure that you've got a really good structure to your assessment document. Just make sure you know what it is you're asking and why you're asking it. Because I think if you don't go in there with a prepared list of, I don't have questions, but I have areas that we need to cover, and then the questions just come, you're just going to miss something otherwise, because you become so enmeshed in the information that you're getting.
Yes.
And what framework for you does help structure that, or what theory you're relying on? And does that change over time as new theory or new information, or you research more, or is it's been the same the whole time? It's always the same thing?
No, it's not. Yeah, okay. Let me work out how to answer that question. I guess all of my structure always goes back to those domains of parenting, so they underpin everything. So when I'm thinking about the areas I need to explore in terms of the family's functioning and the history of the individuals within that family, it always goes back to, well, how can I cover off on all the domains of parenting? And the domains of parenting we talked about
last episode.
Yeah, and you've already touched on this episode. Should I quickly say what they are?
I think so, because in the last episode they weren't, so easy to pull out because we talked a bit.
Are you saying we were not structured and we went all over the place, Rose? What a surprise. Seems very unlikely. All right, so the domains of parenting, and if you listen to the last episode, you'll know that this is kind of 5 points that I've put together when I was synthesizing all of the literature at the time. And then I wasn't sure whether I did make this up or whether I plagiarized the whole thing, but I'm fairly certain I didn't. I'm fairly certain. All right. Okay. So domains of parenting are, the first one is the parent's understanding and insight about the child protection concerns, a demonstration of parental change in understanding and behaviour relating to the child protection concerns, the demonstration and or capacity of the parents for empathy, attunement and attachment for their children, the demonstration and or capacity of the parents to engage with support services now and in the future, the demonstration of the parents to understand the individual needs of the children. So those 5 points underpin everything that I asked the parents. What was the rest of your question?
I guess the theory that you relied on to put that together, and whether that's changed over time or refined perhaps over time.
I think Reg, I don't know, I'm assuming we're the same, but we might be different in terms of the theory that we use. But everything I do has a really strong attachment lens. And I guess I used to be very big on the, the attachment types, kind of understanding the attachment type where this family might function at, where this child might fit in terms of the way that they demonstrate their attachment style. But now I guess I'm relying a lot more on the DMM model of attachment, like a lot more. And I actually use that language when I'm doing my assessments. So whilst it's still an attachment lens, I think kind of the way that I'm thinking about it and applying that attachment lens is a bit different now as I've learnt more. The other thing that I'm relying a lot on at the moment is ambiguous loss and understanding the role of ambiguity in terms of how that then impacts on the functioning of the people within the family. I guess in terms of other theories, it would be the child development theory, parent, family stress and how that impacts, theories around drug and alcohol use and parenting, mental health and parenting, and family violence and parenting. What about you, Rose?
Well, I think you've pretty much covered everything.
Yeah.
Probably the change too. Where are they in the cycle of change? I think we underestimate and sometimes overestimate parents' capacity, and sometimes I think it's because it's misaligned. We haven't considered where we are on the change cycle. But definitely child development theories as well, which I do think you said, and parenting styles. So how does the parenting, and I don't know if, you often hear expressions like they're a tiger parent or a helicopter parent. It's not that. It's, for me, that real authoritarian, authoritative, permissive or neglectful. They're the parenting styles that I'm using in my theory, not those new evolved terms that
free range parents.
Yeah, I'm not even sure really what they mean, but I hear them often. But I when I talk about parenting styles, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, true, very good. Yeah, that's true.
And then again, goodness of fit, socialization, all of those theories are really, I guess, they underpin the formal capacity assessments, but using Jodie's 5 domains.
And I think you mentioned last time you were going to talk about, which I was really looking forward to, the things around the child's temperament and that interaction.
So keen for that. That is still going to be a standalone episode because Rose and I, we're so into temperament.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
So I think you're going to touch on it a little bit today.
Yeah.
But definitely we'll have a whole episode about that and socialization. And we'll probably do them maybe both in one episode.
I think so.
Yeah.
But I think also, Jodie, you talked about family violence, drug and alcohol, mental health, like knowing all of those, and it is massive. And there's even you think about domestic violence as, for instance, the evolution of theory around victims of domestic violence and acts of resistance, and then, creating safety. Like those theories continue to evolve, all those practices, I should say, how we practice and how we work with survivors and victims of domestic violence. So trying to remain up to date on, what's out and around about domestic violence or drug and alcohol, whatever it is. So there's a lot of individual work we have to do to remain up to date on what's happening in practice and what's happening in theory land as well. Like we can't rely on how we practiced 10 years ago, and we can't rely on theories and articles that we read 10 years ago. It's about always remaining contemporary in those spaces. So that's a lot of information and a lot of I don't know what the word is, but just upkeep of your knowledge and your skills.
Yeah, constantly. Yeah. And then, then we need to go and revise templates as we learn more so that they are always so current all of the time. That's a big question, Jess. So I was like, can I answer that? Yeah, hopefully I can.
So we've talked a bit about the skills, so interviewing, the observation, the analytical skills, the, preparing chronologies, analysing how we use theory. So I think we've talked a lot about that skill development, but one skill, I guess, is going back to touch on how do you know when you're being played, and played by either the parents, the system, the agency you're referring, because there can be games that are being played.
Yes,
kind of sphere.
Yeah, very true, very, very true. And I think it's harder though when you feel like maybe the agency is playing a game with you. It's harder to recognize that, but it's harder to do anything about it as well, to test it.
Yeah. And I think we both at the end of the day think, is there a way we can go into a family and benefit the family system or the child? And if there is, we will do it. So sometimes I'm not sure I care too much about being played by the agency.
Yeah.
But it does absolutely occur. Or and often it's masked in that we don't know what we want or what we need, but, we're really stuck here. And then you start to read the file as you get into it, and you can certain matters see there's some power being played out, or there's some oppressive practices happening that are really impacting, or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, how do I just let that go so I can do the very best assessment and give some advice that's actually going to help this family? But it does happen.
I think I used to do it myself. You would refer to somebody that you are fairly confident will see things in the way that you see it.
Like a confirmation bias.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think trying to, when you're sitting, interviewing and observing, a parent, and we all know that people can fake good in assessments, or they can absolutely fall apart and present their very worst selves. There is that pressure and stress that you mentioned earlier, Jodie. But there are, if you think about grooming tactics, like there is a lot of grooming that does happen
for sure
in parenting capacity assessments, and trying to recognize that is sometimes really difficult in the moment.
Yeah. Sometimes when you do, it's kind of fun. Like, I'm not going to lie. It is kind of interesting just to recognize what's happening and to play along a little bit. People like to think that I think they like to think that I'm a little bit dumb. They do. So many people have thought that I'm really like not all there, or, I don't quite know what I'm doing. So, and sometimes I use that to my own advantage. So I will not, one interview I will not challenge at all. I'll just completely listen to the story that they give me. And then in the second interview, it's where I challenge every single thing that they say. And you can see them kind of thinking, oh my God, I thought she was just believing what I was saying. And she wasn't actually.
I think I had her. And I think in our very first episode, I spoke about the time we met at the police station at 2 a.m. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get in, ask the questions, do an assessment, make a decision, get out. It's 2 a.m. on a Saturday, and here's Jodie just really letting this mother tell her what I was pretty certain was a whole lot of bullshit. And it went on and on and on. And I was like, who is this chick from this other office? She's sitting here like we've got all the time in the world, having this lovely conversation with this mum. There's these little kids, and she's just like, oh, okay, and tell me some more about this. And what about this? Didn't challenge. And I'm like, inside, internal raging.
You would have been raging.
When is she going to challenge this mother? When is she going to ask a question?
When am I going to take over? That's what you would get.
But I have also seen it since then with you and other practitioners, and it is an effective skill to just an information dump, very plain face, which I don't have, and I need to master a lot of strength sometimes to try that.
Yeah.
But just to gather the information and let them feel, like they're in control of their narrative and they can tell you what they want.
Yeah, it's really interesting to let people do that. It's and I guess it's that stuff too about being comfortable with silences. And it's really interesting if you can work silence in this whole situation where they're telling you what they want you to know. There's always going to be lots of silences I've worked out along in that, in that little conversation. And I just keep the silence. I don't say a word, because then I want to know how they're going to feel it. I want to know how that sounds, because that's where you actually get a lot of information that they didn't mean for you to have.
Yeah, I think that's a skill that you really need to practice.
Yeah.
Because it can be real uncomfortable sitting in those silences.
Yeah, it can be.
But we have to sit uncomfortably. But I do think it's a practice skill. You can't just, I certainly can't just be like, oh, I'm good with silences today. Because it feels awkward. And you're aware of the pressures of the assessment and, whatever the situation may be. Often their children aren't in their care. Like, there's all of those things you're conscious of, and you don't want to add to it. But you are right. The silences bring a whole lot of gold nuggets.
They really do. Or they bring a whole lot of emotions. And then you kind of to see how people manage times where they might be feeling a little bit internally stressed. But you haven't said or done anything to kind of trigger that. So again, you're still letting their narrative control the whole situation. But you're just using it you're using the way that they communicate, I guess, as a way to test what's happening for them. Yeah, but I kind of like that when people think, gosh, she's believing everything I say. She's a little bit dumb.
You can actually see, well, one that we did together, there was a time where I could actually see the dad, like he just couldn't stop smiling.
Yeah.
You could tell he thought, I've got them.
Yeah.
Like I was just note-taking at that point in time. It's when I was first learning. And you could just see him growing confidence because he thought he had Jodie.
Yeah, that's true. How have you felt or observed grooming play out, Rose, when you've been the practitioner? How's that felt for you?
Sometimes it's felt really icky and it's very obvious, like overly complimentary of you. And it can start with like how nice you look even. And I'm talking both mums and dads here.
Yeah.
And it can start from the get-go. And I can feel very uncomfortable straight away because it's over the top, very obvious. I want to, I want to make you feel comfortable, but what they're actually doing is the direct opposite.
Yeah.
And it's felt very uncomfortable. And often, though, they can't hold it for that long.
Yeah.
So that's okay and we can get through it. And sometimes that may just be nerves and you have to be thinking that too. It's not just automatic. But I don't really know how to describe it. I get this feeling of, that I am actually being groomed or played.
You get the ick.
You do get the ick. And they're so compliant and so people-pleasing, and you might have read a little bit or even observed, the interaction maybe with the caseworker, and then before you come, and that's not how it's been, so this is different, but you feel a bit icky. Other times, I think I've sat through a whole interview with a parent and I've thought, oh, there's a lot of information gathering and it's been okay. And then I've left and on the drive home, I've had this feeling of, oh my gosh, what planet were you on, Rose? I think actually, when I haven't challenged and I'm starting to put their narrative together and you can see the holes or it doesn't make sense. And then I've thought, what just happened? Like I'm sitting taking the information, but when I'm thinking about it, I thought, oh my God, you were just actually really played well.
Yeah.
That has happened recently to me where I've, driven a fair distance back to the office. And by the time I've got back here, I thought, oh, wow, I was just played really good. And it was about presenting themselves in a light that was super positive and actually destroying the child. So sowing doubt about the child. So the child's a liar. The child's manipulating the situation. The child it has all these challenges and it's always the child's fault. And I got back to the office and thought, I started to actually think that way.
Yeah, right.
And that's the moment I knew you were just played. This child doesn't have the capacity and this child's behaviours are telling everyone something, but we're thinking something very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got me. I actually started playing to the narrative.
I mean, some people are really good at being manipulative. And I know the word manipulative has a negative connotation. I actually don't see it as a negative. I think in some way most of us have to manipulate situations. And I think that some people, when that's become perhaps a behavioural strategy that you've needed to employ for a very long time to get people to see the world the way that you see it, you just get really good at it. And sometimes I think maybe that manipulation is really goal-orientated and it's about causing harm. Still, I think they're good at it. Some people, you've got to admit, you've got to give them kudos for being good at using that strategy in the way that they do.
Well, it's also a protective strategy for them, right? Protective in that they can keep doing maybe the harm that they're doing, or protective to keep the secrecy, whatever it is. Like, it can be protective for them too.
Yeah, that's true.
So still goal-oriented, but that's a protective measure for them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But that whole realization of, I started to, like, I started to, you start getting a picture in your head, like this child is this, and I'm thinking, I could see myself probably nodding along, thinking the child's actually got a problem here. But through more work, more observations, obviously reading more, talking more, then interviewing differently, actually the child's behaviour was because that child was really unsafe. That child's needs were not being met.
Yeah.
And that child was screaming out for help. But everyone, all the services and me for that interview and that drive home was starting to think, actually, the child's got this, really deep mental health issue going on here and needs some really serious psychiatric intervention.
They must be really good because you are always on the side of the child, like always. And for you to start doubting that, it must be amazing. But yeah, I feel like I want to meet them. Can we make that happen?
I don't know. I don't think they'd ever really want to see me again or hear my name again. Those people, but
I'd love to meet them because I think they must be very, very good at the games that they play.
Some of that indicates, or does some of that indicate to you their inability to be vulnerable or reflective, in a sense that they're saying they're positioning themselves as a victim of the child's behaviour and then using these strategies to have you see it the same way, shows that they're not actually able to reflect or have any insight, and then that helps make sense of their lack of attunement, perhaps.
Absolutely. And I think the skills I used in the next couple of interviews, I did a behaviour tree with them. And like one of our favourite questions is like, tell me about Jodie. And everything was negative. Everything was about blame or putting shame on that child for, doing things that were developmentally normal or appropriate, or a trauma response, right? So using different skills, I did a timeline with that couple as well, and using all of those tools helped me see that absolutely no insight, absolutely no capacity for empathy for the child, and not one strength could this couple tell me about the child we were talking about.
It's really sad.
Not a strength, and that's when I knew that how I had interpreted and what I was thinking, I was on the right track.
I mean, imagine being that child living in that environment. That's just really horrible.
Really sad.
Yeah, really sad.
And then the empathy for that child that I had about, I understand this child's behaviours now, because for quite a while, no one was listening or seeing the behaviour for what it was. I think a lot of service providers had fallen into the trap I'd fallen into because they had been groomed. But it was like a light bulb moment when I finished the assessment and had a meeting with a number of service providers that were working, and you could see the light, and just the, oh my goodness, like we all collectively fell into this. But they were very good.
Yeah.
This couple was very good at grooming.
They must be. They must be to have kind of gotten you, I reckon they must be. All right. Okay. How long is the information relevant? That's a kind of a question that you and Rose and I had a little bit of a debate about. Not really debate. That's too strong a word. We had a conversation about how long can you keep, can you refer back to an assessment? Like, how long is the information going to be relatable to the current context?
And I guess where I was thinking and coming to that discussion was, in different parts of the world, if you've had children removed from your care, then that becomes really relevant in parenting capacity assessments, and it forms, a part of the assessment. What does the previous parenting look like? What does the removals look like? Has restoration occurred or not?
Yeah.
And then there are also times where you see that, there might be a big gap in a parent's children, and the parenting might have been really, there's still a relationship with adult children and they didn't have statutory intervention. So then they've had this child maybe, 15 years later, and it's written off as, I've seen, they've already parented successfully 3 children. So this, this must just be, situational and it's not a big deal, or we won't really consider the information because, look, they've got 3 older children and they've successfully parented them. So what does successful parenting look like? That they reached the age of 18 and they weren't removed. For me, there has to be a bit more than that successful parenting.
So then are you saying that in some situations the information can remain relevant?
I think the information is always relevant.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's relevant that you would then rely on it and its recommendations to inform your practice 5 years later or 6 years later. But I think it's relevant. that you consider and understand what their parenting capacity looked like at that time.
Yeah.
Still, I think the chronology is relevant because I think that's really helpful for, like, you think about the lifespan of being a parent.
Yeah.
But then I think you still need to use relevant current information to, like, do another assessment.
Like testing the previous.
Testing, and then what's changed, what's different, what's the same.
Yeah.
What have the lessons been learned? Because as a parent, you're always learning. So what's changed? But I do think it's always relevant to a point.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's...
I mean, I agree with that. Why did we have our conversation then? Because I feel like I agree with what you just said.
I think you just looked at me like,
did I?
Oh, what are you talking about, woman? Then I tried to, like, I guess, articulate it a bit more because... I've seen people say, well, that assessment's 5 years old. I'm not even going to read that.
Yeah.
Absolutely read it. Like, you need to read it.
You do, yeah.
It's 5 years old. It doesn't mean you're going to use those recommendations or make a decision based off that information, but it's going to give you so much information about this family's history.
Yeah.
And it's going to give you information about a parent's strengths at that point in time and their challenges. And then what a great platform to then start your curiosity and your assessment from.
Yeah, and I like what you said around that point in time comment because they are very much a snapshot, aren't they? Parenting capacity assessments are a snapshot of the time they were conducted. But the history, and that's why I love chronologies because there's so much power in that history. The history is not a snapshot. The history is the history.
Yes.
That informed the point in time. And so in 5 years' time, there'll be a different point in time.
Taking the view from before and reapplying it with start again syndrome.
Yes.
Kind of stuff.
Oh, start again syndrome. I like that, Jess. I've never heard of that before, but it makes perfect sense.
Let's do our practice example and use the theory in that.
All right. So we when we thought about how we were going to actually talk about a practice example in this episode, we thought we would use a family that Rose and I both know because we did an assessment together on this family, and it was a really complex family. It was a big assessment at the time, and I think it's we do it last year or the year before?
The year before, I think.
Yeah, okay.
It's a lot.
All right.
It's old.
So I'm just going to do a really brief explanation of the family and the context just so there's some common understanding about what it is we're talking about. So there's a dad. He was about 30 when we met him. We changed names, but it's much easier to say call people a name than to say mum, dad, daughter, 1, 2. Yeah. So dad we've named Ivan, age 30. Mum we've named Mary, age 28. One daughter, the oldest daughter, her we've named Anne. She was 8 years old when we met her. The next child is a son. We've called Kevin. He's 7 years old. Then there is another daughter we've called Sharon. She's 5 years old. And then the last child was another daughter who was 2 at the time. Her name is Julie. We've called her Julie. So Ivan is the father of Kevin and Julie. Ivan also has another 2 children who live with different mothers. So Ivan and Mary had a relationship, then they were apart for a period of time, and then they got back together. So that's how that timeline kind of works. Both parents have experienced generational abuse. So Ivan is currently estranged. Is that how you say that? I was going to say not in contact with his family. His relationship with his family though is really changeable and really related to what he needed at the time. So when he needed something, he would say he had good connections with his family, but as soon as they met his need, he would cut them off again. And that is a pattern that kind of showed throughout his history. So Ivan, in talking to him, he denied any child protection concerns in his family, but also then said that he was homeless at 14 after being kicked out, and said that in other interviews that there was family violence between his parents, but he did not see that as a child protection concern. And he did not see that as something that impacted on his own development. So Mary's family of origin was well known to child protection services. She comes from a family known for violence, drug use and mental health concerns. Mary's father is a known sex offender and he served time for sex offences against children. It was alleged that when she was growing up, well, actually, still currently, both parents were regular methamphetamine users. Mary's parents I'm talking about, not Mary. Mary has a history of suicide ideation and self-harm. So we know that in terms of her stress responses, she has a history of trying to manage that by self-harming. So Mary and Ivan's children were the subject of previous child protection reports. The reported concerns included exposure to family violence between Mary and Ivan. Mary had some other relationships in between her relationship with Ivan that were also violent. So there were reports about the children experiencing family violence with those men as well. There was also reports about the children being exposed to drug use, parental drug use. And so Ivan's drug of choice was cannabis. Mary's drug of choice, she says that she doesn't use anything. There have been concerns about amphetamine use in the past. The children, Mary and Ivan's children, were removed. Mary's parents moved in with the family, and the biggest concern was the fact that Mary's father was on the child protection, was a known sex offender, and Mary and Ivan refused to participate in safety planning with the statutory child protection service at the time. The children were removed to ensure that they were safe from their grandfather. At the time the formal parenting capacity assessment was undertaken, the children had been out of home for approximately 9 months. Mary and Ivan had engaged in support services and met the requirements of the child protection case plan. However, there were still some concerns about the viability of restoration, hence the request for a parenting capacity assessment. Because this was in children's court, we received a long list of terms of reference. For this assessment, there was 16 points. In terms of the terms of reference, if we were to summarise the terms of reference, it really was about information about the quality of the relationship between the children and each parent, the understanding of Mary's and Ivan's understanding about what the child protection concerns had been and why they were concerns. The agency wanted us to kind of assess some of the risk factors, drug and alcohol, family violence, mental health, and what they looked like at the time when the parenting capacity was being done, and then the impact they had on parenting generally. And then it was about the parents' understanding of how to actually meet the needs of children now and in the future. Yeah. So all of that in 16 very long points. Yeah.
I think what was interesting too was Mary and I had engaged in formal support services. But what might have been missing from those terms of reference was about their informal support network and I guess the quality of those relationships, but also the impact it had on their family unit.
Yeah.
Because that was the one thing really that wasn't covered in the terms of reference, which kind of stood out, didn't it? Because of, I guess, their informal support system was a lot of people that used drugs and there was violence in their relationship, but there was a whole other side of the family that were actually not engaged in violence or drugs and alcohol, that there was no real relationship with. And so if you're thinking about protective strategies and building, support for a family system, it kind of seems obvious that you would kind of be wondering or curious about why those relationships weren't stronger or, what was happening over there. It always stood out to me as something interesting that wasn't considered as part of the assessment.
Yeah, true. Absolutely true. I guess talking a little bit about how Mary and Ivan presented. So they were very interesting. It did seem very, very clear that Mary was the boss in the relationship and she was very much in charge of what she said, but also what Ivan said. And if he said the wrong thing, then she really jumped on it quickly to try and, I guess she did a lot of activity, didn't she, to try and deflect from what he had said or what he had done. And there were times when Ivan showed some really, really strong emotions throughout the parenting capacity assessment interviews. I'd say probably appropriate though, so the context of the conversation is not like we were talking about the weather and he said, "Get out of my house." Like it wasn't like that.
Yes.
It was some strong emotion attached to the narration of his life at that time. So it was kind of appropriate, but she would then do this flurry of activity to try and deflect.
Trying to water it down, make it go away,
Yeah.
Look over here, nothing to see there.
Yeah.
Whilst giving him the look of shut up and pull yourself together. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she talked a lot, didn't she?
So much.
She did talk a lot. And we spent many, many hours sitting there listening to Mary, watching how Ivan listened to Mary, wondering whether Mary actually listens to herself. It was very interesting. But also there was some times where it felt quite icky, if we're using the word icky to describe feeling groomed. There were times where it was icky, and that was caused, and that was the manipulation that Mary did of the interactions we were having to try and make sure we saw the story the way she wanted us to see the story.
And there was lots of irrelevant information given to us by Mary, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Like so much information that wasn't really relevant.
Yeah.
But it was a way to paint, I guess, herself in this light.
Yeah.
And just to, I also think, fill the time and take the time up so we weren't actually getting to where we needed to be. I think that was a bit of her strategy too.
Definitely in the first interview, because we did, and it was really hard for Rose, for you to, I appreciate how hard this was for you. I just let her talk. Sometimes tried to engage Ivan, but really it was Mary's show.
Yeah.
And in the second interview, we were much more direct, cut her off, engaged Ivan even more because I wanted to hear from Ivan, and she did not like the fact that she wasn't in charge. But that was intentional because we wanted to see what she would do.
She'd do.
What did she do? She initially tried to do that deflection activity harder, like it was much more intense. When that was cut down, and I was quite direct with, well, we actually can't talk about that right now. We'll get back to that, but we need to talk about this. She kind of retreated, but then would come back in. So she physically retreated, like she'd sit back in a chair. She had a look like, like up yours, lady. I can talk about what I want to talk about. But then when Ivan started to talk, she had to take control again. So she would sit forward and she would control.
At one point, she went into the kitchen like she was trying to distract herself to get something, put something away. But he started talking about something that
she ran back.
Maybe she didn't want him to say, and she did run.
She did run. Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. It was really interesting. It's really interesting. There were a lot of worries about Mary and Ivan. There were. But one of the things kind of evident for me was the way they spoke about their children was actually quite positive. It was positive. It wasn't deficit-based.
No.
It was very much, they believed that their children were the most amazing things in the world, which was kind of unexpected, to be honest, and it was good to hear. They also, I think, believed that their parenting at that time was also amazing and that they'd just been judged harshly by the Child Protection Agency.
Well, and it was also the grandfather's fault, so it's very easy. Right. And I think if you think about their context, sure, when the agency went in to remove their children, it was about the grandfather, who's a registered sex offender, being in their home. And all the terms of reference that are about mental health, drug and alcohol, domestic and family violence, they came much later.
Yeah.
But their piece of paper that they had about removal was about Granddad. It wasn't about them. Yet there was a whole lot of prior reports about their parenting.
Yeah.
But their paper said Granddad. So from their context, you can also see when they don't think there's a problem in their parenting, there's a whole lot of intergenerational trauma and parenting that's been harmful that has occurred for both of them. From their view, you could see their context.
Yeah, very true. And they were, rightly so, they were jumping on that. They were saying the children were removed because he was here. He's no longer here. So the way that the assessment was actually written was we wanted people to understand that the initial decision to allow a man that they actually know offended against children into the home without thinking about the consequence that might have for their own children's safety was the crux of the issue.
Yeah.
All the other stuff was kind of important, but that was the crux. That was the issue that was the most important because that's where their parenting decision-making kind of sat for me. So we had to take it back to that place. And when we were thinking about that, I think they said the right things in relation to that. We know we should not have done that. for this reason. Yeah.
And they'd had at least 7 months of intervention from good support services about their parenting capacity. So they'd definitely done some work, but they definitely also had the language to use.
They did have the language.
Yeah.
Yeah. From an attachment lens, one of the things that I was really interested in is what that relationship, because they said nice things about the kids. So what did that actually look like? What was the interaction between the children and their parents? So we observed a family contact to try and get some information about that. But we also read lots of reports because one of the services they were involved in was an all-of-family service. So there were lots of reports about the interaction.
And that theory that kind of underpinned that also was Bronfenbrenner's, ecological systems theory. So because you think that about their family as a system, but also how they interacted with, I guess, the grandparents and then some siblings too that had some challenges and struggles. So you're looking at family systems theory too, and what did it all look like? And then how did the family system interact with such a service, a formal professional service that was there to aid in restoration, I guess.
They very much, I think, groomed that service. So that service thought they were amazing and thought everything and was really advocating hard for restoration to happen with or without a parenting capacity assessment. And every time there was some kind of disconnect between one of the parents and one of the children at that service, it was written off as
stress or a challenge.
Yeah, that's right. Little one was tired, something like that. Instead of actually maybe think or looking at that from a different lens in terms of the actual capacity of the parents to meet their needs. So maybe an attunement lens. One of the other things that kind of came under when we were thinking, if we're thinking about this from an attachment lens, that kind of influenced that attachment lens was that history of family trauma. So that you reminded me of that when we were talking about ecological systems theory, and the way that intergenerational trauma, I think, kind of shaped the way that they actually knew how to show love to somebody else.
Absolutely shaped it.
God, we went deep, didn't we? We had to go deep for this one because there was such intergenerational trauma that happened.
And was still happening.
Like
there was so much for both of them from their family systems. And then there's also, remember, 2 other dads to 2 other children. And like that as well was a layer because there was intergenerational trauma in their paternal families too. Like this was very nuanced family system intersecting with other family systems that all kind of had this history and experiences still of abuse and neglect.
And when you're coming from a position of good enough parenting, you have to really understand how that history, the parents' history being parented, shaped who they are as parents.
And that really challenged me.
It did.
I really struggled in this assessment because good enough parenting and there's no universal agreement on what is good enough. So, there can be that real subjective way of thinking, but I really struggled in this assessment about what is good enough for these 4 children and what is good enough today. Is it going to be good enough in 4 years and then in 10 years? Like I really struggled around that, didn't I?
Well, and it was about the parents' capacity to demonstrate good enough given what their own experiences had been.
Yes, and that's the part that I kept missing.
Yeah.
Given their experiences and given the capacity that they had shown to engage with services, which was really positive, and trying to put aside the fact that I did think they'd groomed this service and the service maybe had done them a disservice.
Yeah.
For like 6 months.
Yeah.
It could have been a whole lot of different work had the service maybe had come from more a child development lens or an attachment lens.
Or just a child's lens.
Or just a child's lens would have been nice.
Yeah, it would have been nice. Yeah. Yeah. It was tricky. It was a tricky assessment for all of those reasons. But for me, it was tricky because, I always had to remind myself that these parents, they've been shaped by their own experiences so much that you have to then apply that good enough lens.
And what was helpful, I guess, was the legislation. Yeah. And our legislation in New South Wales is very clear, isn't it? That where children are safe enough to be parented by their parents, that is where they will be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a really good frame as well, because the legislation, it is very black and white.
Yeah.
But I think the socialization of those children and then nature nurture about those children, that also kind of was a struggle for me, because the children's personalities and temperaments and the way that they were individually was also a little bit challenging.
It was very challenging. And in the context that the family contact we observed, you know, there was so many miscues from both parents. I mean, it's an artificial, you know, interaction. It was at one of those those bloody playmates places. Even though we specifically said, please do not get out of playmates or one of those places. Of course, that's where it was.
And I have to say, a contact at a playmate centre, it might be appropriate for some children some of the time. It might be actually the best thing.
Of course.
But in a parenting capacity assessment with ages, 8, 7, 5 and 2.
Yeah.
In an indoor small playmate centre.
Yeah.
And when we had specifically said numerous times, please no, that's where we end up. Oh, honestly, I just wanted to stab my eyeballs out with pens.
It was 3 hours of our lives, we'll never get back. But it was, I mean, obviously for the assessment, it was crucial. It was crucial. And the interaction wasn't great.
No.
It wasn't great.
Because of the miscues.
Because of the miscues.
And I think also the temperament of some of the children was really challenging to parent with everything that they were parenting with, their history, their experiences. It was a challenge.
What were the miscues that you saw?
Oh, so many.
Miscues around hunger, needing comfort at times, needing a bit of security to be brave enough to go up the slide or down the slide, that feeling of my mum or dad have my back, and then children are asking, for some safety and security around this tricky task for, a 2-year-old to climb this jungle gym. Yeah. No, I'm just going to sit and watch. Or I'm going to feed the 2-year-old with all of the sugar and all of the, all of the snacks that when there's appropriate healthy snacks, when they were overtired, already had eaten, and then maybe I think one of them spilled the sauce bottle or the chips or something went wrong, and it wasn't a big deal. But then instead of the reassurance and it's, been a big day and it's okay and we're all got these weird people watching us, it was then how do I make this better and a blame? And, it became a crisis that didn't need to be. And the children were already off kilter, but still we're not seeing that cues that these kids, they just, at some points, they really just needed a cuddle and let's sit down and it's okay.
They did. The parents were really stressed. So the parents went into this situation really stressed. It didn't.
Play days are so stressful.
And I think this is the family where it remind me, this is one where one of the kids was hitting another kid, So there was there was limited boundaries put in place. And one of the kids was actually attacking, I'd say use the word attacking, another child, an unrelated child. Who was just using the play centre, like physically attacking this kid. And mum and dad, Ivan and Mary, were just watching.
And the parent of the other child, who I assumed to be the parent of the other child, they were not just watching.
They were not
this is okay. There was a lot going on. But what did we recommend, Jodie?
Yeah, I know. And I'm still we recommended restoration. We had a lot of precursors for restoration, what it needed to look like. And the reason we recommended restoration is because, I think Rose, you already said this, the legislation is very clear around when restoration needs to be considered as a viable option. The parents had engaged in support services, whereas actually before they hadn't really had the opportunity to engage in anything.
Yes, and there was a long history of child protection reports and concerns, but never had there been an actual, assessment where statutory agency went in and stayed in for any length of time and offered services. And they did. They jumped on any service that was even discussed as a possibility. They followed up and wanted to be involved. They wanted to do all the things, and they were actively doing all the things.
They were very active.
Yeah. So with all the precursors, I guess, you're trying to then create even another layer of safety around this is then what needs to happen for restoration to be successful, because you can restore a child, sure, but what we want is successful restoration where the parenting changes. There's that demonstration of everything they've learnt from their formal services. There's more attunement to their children and a deeper understanding of what all their children need. So we wanted to layer, I guess, our recommendations with those precursors to make sure it was actually successful, not just restored, because there is a difference. You can restore kids, no dramas, but what we want is successful restoration.
And I guess the way that the report was written was that it was really clear that this was a hard decision to make. And it was really clear that these were the risks, and these were the long-standing risks that had never been addressed, and these were the current contextual risks, and that this had been the impact on the children. And that in analysing the information, the decision for restoration, I think it was really clear why we made that decision. So that it wasn't about someone couldn't read this and go, well, good, they said all this stuff, which doesn't seem to be the best in terms of parenting capacity, and yet they're recommending restoration. How did that happen? I like to write a report by stepping through the way that I'm thinking, so that anyone and people join me on the journey of what I'm thinking, whether they want to or not.
And I think the feedback from that caseworker who said that they had read the assessment from the start to the end, and I know I've got assessments and I've gone straight to the recommendations before I read them, but this caseworker said that they'd read the assessment and wasn't sure which way the recommendations were going to go. Like, it was a very, in their opinion, balanced, as in it was very strengths-based, but also all the challenges or deficits, whatever word you want to use, were clearly explored and talked about. So when the caseworker got to the recommendations, they said, they went, oh, okay. Like, it was actually a surprise because they weren't sure which way they were going to go. I think what's also hard, we talked about what's hard as a practitioner in parenting capacity assessments, is you do all this work, put in so many. For this to be successful, this needs to happen. There were lots of things that needed to happen to make restoration successful for these 4 children. It's then letting go and trusting that work is actually going to then be done by someone, and that someone's then not going to be possibly removing these children in 6 months' time going, well, what the hell did you pay for that parenting capacity assessment for? Because it said to restore them, and look, now it's been unsuccessful. I had that fear around that, because if the work wasn't followed through, the recommendations weren't followed through with good practitioners, it could easily have toppled over.
Yeah. That's a real fear, isn't it, when you're writing these reports?
It's reputation based too, doing these assessments.
Yeah.
And it's out of your control.
So out of your control.
Yeah. Which I guess is why I like to write them, by allowing people to see the way I'm thinking about it. Because at least it makes sense to me then. Hopefully it makes sense to them. They can disagree. Lots of people have disagreed with me. And that's fine. But it is, it's scary. I think it's scary, and you do have to be vulnerable as a practitioner.
Yeah.
When you're making really such big recommendations, life-changing recommendations.
And do you talk to the children in that circumstance?
We tried with the oldest children, do you remember? And well, I went in with the intention to, but spoke to their carers, and I'm pretty sure this is one where we made a decision not to interview the oldest children because they had spoken to so many services. There were lots of worries. They had actually been told they were being restored to their parents by the statutory agency. Remember that? And so there was a lot of confusion around, for those children, what was happening and when was I going home, and we did not want to add this layer of 2 more strange women coming in to talk to them when we had enough information from the observation, from the services, from the file, from the caseworkers, from the parents. We spent so long with those parents, like it was a very in-depth, multiple assessments. So we wrote a rationale for why we didn't interview the children in this formal capacity assessment, but in other parenting capacity assessments, absolutely, we will talk to the children.
Yeah, it's very case by case, because the last thing I ever want to do is just talk to a kid because, and then I can tick a box. Yeah, because there has to be benefit.
Reason.
There has to be benefit. because it's just really weird for them to talk to this strange woman who they know exactly what my role is. They might not always understand it because it depends on, how old they are and their kind of developmental stage at the time. But they know that I have a role in making these decisions about whether they're going to go home or not. Yeah.
And the outcome of that, if you'd, spoken to them and their voice had informed that more than your assessment of the parents, could be really detrimental for them in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you would never put that pressure on a kid, like never. This, this situation is about their parents, not really, not about any deficit that they have. It's always about, what's happened in the parenting, because their parents, the adults.
Very quick side story. A few weekends ago, I was helping this young boy in my neighbourhood who was very cold and hungry and sitting in the gutter and refusing to go home. And after some hours, I unfortunately had to call the police. And the policeman that attended one of them had been at this child's home much earlier in the day. And so walked up and said to him, he wanted to go home to his dad, and he said, why do you want to go home to your dad? Is it because he lets you do whatever you want and you get away with everything scot-free? And I said, excuse me, actually not his responsibility for how he's parented. He's a child. And if you want to have a conversation about parenting, by all means, how about you have it with his mum or dad? But let's not have a parenting conversation with a child and place those expectations on him. Yeah. And anyway, it went very downhill from that point on. But I think oftentimes people engage in conversations or have offhanded remarks for children in this space.
Yeah.
And it's not fair. It's not a child's responsibility. And they're not accountable for how they're parented. That is a conversation you have with parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that is, obviously from doing this work, that's how I've, come to this and have that kind of belief and value. But it's very much like that in parenting assessments. If there's no purpose, if it's not going to aid the assessment, why would we do that to a child? But I do think there is oftentimes pressure for us to speak to every child in every assessment to tick a box.
Yeah. Yeah, but I also see that you want to give children the opportunity to participate. I see that as well. But I think that, and what I've said in the past in not only parenting capacity assessments but care assessments, is that's fine. You as the caseworker have the conversation with the child because they know you. Or get somebody else to have the conversation with the child if the caseworker and the child relationship is not positive. Get someone else to do it. Not expect them to have this conversation with a stranger.
Yeah. Just think about relationship building.
Yeah.
And how just that whole theory around trust and, developing a relationship. The expectation that a child that's in the child protection or out of home care arenas gonna automatically trust this strange lady coming in and tell them actually what's going on, and then you're going to decide what weight you put to their words. Yeah. Like it's sometimes I think we are a little out of line with our expectations of children. But we're going to do an episode on participation and, hearing the child's voice and balancing that, aren't we, Jodie?
We sure are.
This wraps up this episode of Relational Practice, a social work podcast. To ensure you don't miss future discussions relevant to your practice, including our next fortnight's episode, which will be on, I have no clue, we'll figure it out.
It'll be something amazing, I'm sure.
No doubt. But stay tuned, we'll let you know what that is on our socials. So subscribe or have a look at them to help other social workers find us, but also to know what we're talking about in the next episode. Until then, stay safe and continue to practice relationship.
Maybe someday